Okay, everybody, welcome to movement pattern number 3. Okay, so what we've already gone over in our movement patterns are number 1, the hinge, number 2, horizontal push and pull, and number 4, vertical push and vertical pull. Okay, now we've already gone over those because those the hinge is probably the hardest movement pattern that we've gone over as far as an understanding. The second two that we went over, horizontal push and pull and vertical push and pull, those are a little bit easier concepts and things that you've probably seen or even done yourself. Okay. Now the third one is a very misunderstood movement pattern. There's a lot of debate over this movement. If you kind of dive into the world of what's the best way to do this and what's the best loading strategy, which exercise is king, right? And that's the squat. Okay. The squat is very misunderstood as far as its purpose, I think, and its application is really where people kind of miss the point. Okay, the standpoint, the viewpoint that we have to remember where we're at as far as going over these movements is this is the beginning. Okay, so I teach these things in a way where you would be teaching it to somebody who's brand new. And the progression of the exercise starts from its most basic form, and again the strategy gets more and more essentially risky and complicated depending on where the load is. Okay, now squatting is something that everyone does pretty much every day, right? So if you sat down today, right, anywhere in some form or fashion, you squatted. Okay, now when it comes to a training perspective, there's a couple things that we need to make sure we're kind of checking off. Okay, so we need to check off certain things to ensure that we're not going to risk injury when we're talking about movement in the squat. Okay, so a squat is a bilateral exercise, which means that you're on both feet. Okay, and when you're squatting down properly, okay, what happens is you should essentially look kind of like this, right? Your feet should be a little bit shoulder width or a little bit outside shoulder width, and the important thing is that your trunk stays as upright as possible while your knees don't collapse in. Okay, so what a lot of people might do, and this can be, and I'll get into this a little bit more as you move along in the video, but some people will tend to lean forward more in the squat, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. We just have to make sure that that's somebody's solution, right? That's somebody's best solution for them to be able to do this the movement correctly. Okay, so when we're talking about things that we're doing right in a squat, our feet are a little bit outside of shoulder width. Okay, we have tension, we have active feet. Okay, so we're getting into our stable position. Okay, our butt is going to push back and down. Okay, and our trunk, right? Our trunk needs to stay upright. So we're aiming to push our butt back and down while keeping an upright torso. Okay, now from here to here, that is highly predicated on somebody's mobility. So what you will find is that people will break down at the point where they don't have the mobility to keep going, right? So you probably heard a lot of people say, hey man, you gotta squat all the way down, like get lower, get lower, get lower. Well, sometimes people can't get lower correctly, okay? So what will start to happen is, as you start to go down, a couple things will happen. Either 1, you're just gonna start leaning forward. 2, your knees are going to cave in. 3, your back's going to pop out. Or 4, you're going to come off of your full foot and you're going to let your heels come off the ground. Okay, so those are some things that people do wrong. And the reasons that they do those wrong is because that's the movement solution or strategy they are coming up with to accomplish the task that you are asking them to do when they cannot. And part of that is highly due to mobility. Okay, so the exercise list or the progression that you should go through with somebody, you start with bodyweight squatting. You move on to dumbbell goblet squatting. Then you move to barbell front squatting, and then you move to barbell back squatting. The reason that it goes this way is because you start off with no load. You want to master the movement strategy itself and attain the mobility that you need, right? You attain that first, okay? The second thing is you want to keep the weight in front of you to make it so that you have to be upright. If you can enforce somebody early on to stay upright, then most likely they're going to create that movement solution they need best to ensure they're in a proper position. Okay? So we go to dumbbell goblet, then we go to barbell goblet, and then that's when you want to try to put something on somebody's back. Anytime you put load on somebody's spine, that's when you need to have almost like a high risk radar on, right? We need to be assured that we are looking for and assuring that somebody's having the proper tension during that movement. Okay, so we're about to dive into the rest of the exercise progression, the individual exercises. So make sure you have your checkoff sheets ready to be writing down the form, the common mistakes, and the basic anatomy. Okay. So the first progression that we're going to go over is the bodyweight squat itself. Okay. When I do bodyweight squatting with somebody, I like to make sure that I'm setting them up to continue to progress. So I always ensure that somebody, when they're doing bodyweight squatting, has their hands in a gobble position. Now there's no weight there, but they're going to have their hands here only because this is what I'm going to have them do next. So I want them to get used to finding the right position and finding the form while having their hands here. So when we put a weight there, the only thing we have to do is make sure they're getting proper tension. Okay, so like we've talked about in this course, getting proper tension is key. Okay, so like we have our active stable position, and in our stable position, we make sure that our feet are grabbing the ground, so we have tension all throughout our legs. We make sure our core is active and our scaps are depressed. Okay, so that is to ensure that we have this nice trunk position. We're in, our ribs are stacked right over our pelvis, and we're ready to go. Okay, when I'm having somebody work on a bodyweight squat, okay, I want to start setting them up with the cues that I'm going to use for later. Now, when we're talking about basic anatomy, okay, squats are quad dominant. Okay, but you need to ensure that you're utilizing your glutes. Okay, so the way that you know somebody's turning on their glutes, or the way that you find out if they're not, is knee cave. Okay, so if I tell somebody to squat, okay, and their legs collapse it hard like this, okay, now that drastic of a collapse means that they have no tension coming from the back of their body. Okay, and to ensure that we're not putting our joints in a certain in our medial muscles in a bad position, right? We need to basically turn these on. Okay, so how you do that is it's the cue called spread the floor, right? So when I have my feet kind of grabbed into the ground, as I don't want to think about just going down. Okay, because if I think about just going straight down, my knees will tend to come in. What I need to think about is spreading the floor apart with my feet. Now that doesn't mean my feet actually move, but what it means is that I'm going to actively be driving tension this way. Okay, so I'm almost like pushing my legs out against the wall. So if I had to pretend I had two walls right here, I'm trying to drive into the wall as hard as I can, and I sink down all the way, and then I come back up. Okay, now some knee cave, right? So if you have somebody go here and their knees come in a little bit like that, that is fine. Some people get a little bit excessive on how strict they are with valgus knee movement. It's something that you need to be aware of, right? But if somebody's collapsing super hard, like you will know when it's drastically an outlier and you need to address it. If it's something that's small, just reinforce the cue to spread the floor to make sure we're creating tension here, okay? The other thing is keeping the trunk upright, and that's why I like to have the hands here. So when you move the hands here, naturally the body's going to want to fall forward because you have more weight up top and you're rotating over your hip, right? So it's going to force you to learn to keep upright. So that's the cue that I like to use, is spread the floor, upright, upright, upright. Okay, spread the floor, upright, upright, upright. Okay, it's important to make sure you maintain that trunk position. And the reason that you have to master it in the bodyweight squat is because once you put a bar on your back, if I fail to stay upright and keep tension in that position, when I have a bar in my spine, I'm going to come up like this. Now, if you remember, that kind of looks like another movement that we've already went over. Some people will really squat and come up in a good morning. And that's because of a lack of proper tension. And if they're not strong enough, that's going to get them hurt, guaranteed. So the reason that we make sure we're enforcing those proper cues and turning on those correct muscles is to ensure that we prevent injury when we put load on the body, especially the spine and the back squat. But that starts from the bodyweight squat. And again, I like to have the hands already up here in my bodyweight squat training only because I know what I'm going to progress to. And what I'm going to progress to is the dumbbell goblet squat. Okay, so now that we've gone over the proper form really for the squat in general, that overall movement strategy, now you want to start to load it, right? And the way that we start loading it is in a goblet form. Now a goblet hold, or if you see goblet in front of any exercise, all that means is that you're going to hold a dumbbell or a kettlebell. You'll hold it in this fashion, okay? It's out in front of you. This is a precursor to being able to use the bar, okay? Now, I've already had somebody progress and I've already had somebody practice the squat pattern without any weight, right? So I've already mastered somebody so that they're able to do this, okay? Now, when I think that they're ready, I'm going to start adding the load. So the cues are essentially exactly the same. So as it boils down to it, I need to spread the floor and I need to stay upright, okay? If I see somebody falling forward and back, I know that they are not emphasizing keeping an upright trunk. If you emphasize them to keep an upright trunk, the squat pattern will manifest itself, okay? Another important thing, once you add weight, that's when you'll start to see breakdown for people. Now, again, in the first part of this video, I addressed mobility as an issue. In a bodyweight squat, some people will not be able to get down all the way. They will not be able to get to certain positions. When you add weight, that could go one of two ways. So sometimes the weight will actually help somebody. So the weight might actually give them that extra push to get down to where they need. For other people, it's going to be the first indicator of what they cannot do. So you going from a bodyweight squat and then saying, all right, you know what? I think you're good. Let's skip all the way to a barbell squat. That is dangerous because once you put load on somebody, that's when the story starts to be told, right? The fine print. You'll see the fine print and be able to understand, all right, this person's going to break down at this point. I need to enforce that, okay? So again, with the goblet, this is a quad dominant movement, the squat, okay? You need to make sure that you are using the glutes as well. So I use the glutes by spreading the floor, and essentially the quads are what's working on the way up. So I'm here to here to here, okay? Enforcing those same cues, spread the floor, upright, upright, upright. You can spend a lot of time in this movement, this specific exercise. This specific exercise is really good for people to learn. It's really good to reinforce like where somebody needs to be. Last common error. So the last common error is once you start to put weight on, you'll see as people go down, their heels like to pop up right away, okay? For some people, they have certain biomechanics that will not allow them to get to the proper position. So what you want to do, or a strategy that you can use, is you actually grab some weights, like something that is about an inch off the ground, okay? Or even if you have a little ledge on a platform, you have somebody get to that. And what you do is you make the plates about as far as their feet would be spread, and you have their heels come up. Now, when you do this, you're essentially changing the lever that the foot is the ankle joint is acting at. I'm not going to get into that. But what's happening is essentially you're putting this person in a better position for them to be able to reach the positions that you want and train the muscles that you want. Okay, so if you are finding that someone's really struggling from bodyweight squat to dumbbell goblet squat to be able to reach these positions, you elevate their heels to help them find that position and eventually slowly take these away where they can do that motion without it as they gain the mobility for it. So now that you've gone through the body weight progression itself of the squat and then you've moved on to the dumbbell goblet version of it, we still want to make sure that we're going to, one, increase the progression of this by making it more complex, but we also don't want to jump too far. Okay, so we want to do something that's kind of similar to what we were just doing, but also not something that's completely dangerous yet. Okay, and I'm not saying that adding a barbell to a movement is completely dangerous. It's only dangerous if you haven't done the right things to progress the person along. That's why I like to have the barbell front squat. Okay, now the thing is the barbell front squat, cue-wise, is the same exact thing as the dumbbell goblet squat. Once you learn how to cue the squat from its core, you can do that with almost every single exercise. The emphasis of the working muscles is just different. Okay. Now with the barbell front squat, that's the same as the dumbbell goblet squat, Okay, so it is a quad dominant movement, but you still need to make sure that you're using your glutes. Okay, now a thing with the barbell front squat, and if you don't know what that is, somebody's going to put the bar on here. Okay, it's going to go on their shoulders. Does not go on somebody's neck. Okay, so it's a very, very important distinction as far as preventing somebody from seriously hurting themselves. Okay, so the front squat itself looks like this. Okay, now mobility is a very big issue with this movement. Okay, clearly I am lacking in that. My elbows should be driving up so that they're parallel with the floor, but they're not. I don't have the mobility to do that. The key is though, is that I can rest the bar on my shoulders and I can squat down and keep that upright torso, I'm in an okay spot. Okay. Another thing that is kind of along that mobility line, mobility for this movement, at this point you should already have the mobility as far as like your lower body and your trunk to be able to go through the squat. What you're going to be lacking now is actually your wrist, forearm, and tricep. Okay, so that's why I can't really get under the bar like that, is because I'm very tight in my wrist, forearms, and triceps. So I can't maintain that position. And to be honest, if you try this, it's going to hurt the first time that you do that. Your fingers and your wrists will be sore. Now, for some people, they'll be able to tolerate that and they can kind of push through that. That's one of those things with this movement that you kind of have to just get over. Some people and some athletes that you work with, they're not going to be okay with that. So you need another solution. You need another strategy. Okay, so if it's something where I'm not able to get to that position because of my mobility, what you do is you actually do a cross arm strategy. And what you do is you make sure that the bar is resting on the delts, on the shoulders, not on your neck. Right, so I take them in here and I actually cross my arms and I hold it like this. Okay, so people who struggle with mobility, now I'm still doing a front squat. Okay, the load's still out in front of me, but I don't have to worry about the mobility of my wrists and my fingers and my triceps. Now I can just work on staying upright and going through the motion of the squat. Okay, so front squats are a very good way to build the quads. Again, when the load's out in front of you, it's a quad dominant movement, but you still need to make sure that you are turning on your glutes as far as an injury prevention thing. This is the first step to using barbells. Now, a very important aspect that has to be talked about is spotting technique when you're talking about a barbell exercise. Now, if I'm doing a barbell exercise, especially the front squat, the load is out in front of me, okay? If somebody is going to dump this, which means that the weight or the movement's not happening for them, they go down, they fall like this, and they're not having it, you do not touch the bar or them. You let them drop it, okay? Because you're going to do more damage trying to help them fight through bad technique and bad tension to their shoulders, their wrists, their fingers, their back, than you will if you just let them drop it. Okay, so it's really important to know that when somebody has something out in front of them, okay, especially in the barbell front squat, what I'm going to do is I go down and I can't come up. I drop the bar on the ground just like that. You have to teach somebody how to bail a bar first before you actually let them go through the movement, especially once they get to heavier weight. That is this essential thing for you as a coach or a trainer or whatever you're doing to make sure that you hold yourself accountable and you protect yourself. Because if you get somebody hurt when they're doing this exercise and you tried to spot them, that means you're negligent and you're at fault, okay? So when you do that, the barbell front squat exercise, it's essential that you teach the person how to dump the bar first, and then you let them try to work on the movement itself. Now that's basically the second most or the third most complex part of this progression. Now the third we're going to get to is the barbell back squat. So the last progression of the squat is our barbell back squat. Now pretty much everything that we've done to this point has been a front loaded exercise where the load is going to be in front of the body and it's almost going to be trying to take the body to rotate forward, so we have to maintain that by staying upright. Okay? When you put the bar on your back, things get a little bit dicey, only because now you have load directly through your spine. Okay, so you have to make sure that the bar is in the right position, and two, you're enforcing the same cues. Okay, now when you have a barbell back squat, depending on where the bar is on your back, this is most likely a little bit more glute and back dominant. Okay, your quads are obviously still acting just because of the nature of what the squat movement is. okay? Now, the way that I would teach somebody how to back squat at first would be a high bar, okay? So a high bar back squat means that you're putting the bar on your upper trap, okay? So, and the reason you do this is because this is gonna help you maintain that upright position we've been working on pretty much for all of the progression this whole time. So when you do the high bar, it goes right up here. Okay, so it's very high up on my back, and this will allow me to sit back and down more where I'm in that upright torso position. Okay, I'm still spreading the floor this whole time. So I have active feet, I got a stable position, and I'm spreading the floor back and down, up, back and down, up. But the key is that I'm trying to stay upright. The more the bar moves down your back, so this would be like a low bar position, and I don't have the mobility to do this. That's why my arms are so far out. But if I'm here and I try to stay upright, the bar is going to literally fall off my back. So the strategy I have to do to combat that is I have to lean forward more. Now this squat looks a lot different than the ones that I've been teaching. Okay? This low bar squatting strategy is a way to get the weight closer to the hips when you're in the bottom. So if you look at my hip pointer and you look where the bar is, it's a lot closer than if I'm here. Okay? The reason people do the low bar strategy is it allows you to do more weight. So that's like a powerlifting kind of movement, right? So that's something that if you're specific to lifting, at some point you should be able to low bar to get the most out of that movement. Okay? You're gonna have the highest weight, and we're talking about specificity. For powerlifting, well, you have to have the highest weights. So doing that strategy would help you the most, okay? So when you're putting the bar on somebody's back, start it at high bar. If they have a need to, work them down. If they don't have a need to, don't work them down. There's a lot more risk putting the bar lower on the back than there is keeping it up high, okay? So the cues are the same. Just understand that the working muscles, if you were writing it earlier in the other progressions as quads, then glutes. This way, for the barbell, you need to write it glutes, then quads to emphasize that the posterior is probably gonna be a little bit more important than the anterior. Okay, now, there's a way to decipher weaknesses for all of these movements as far as like, you know, if you see somebody doing X type of movement strategy, then you're gonna say, hey, you know what, you have weak hips or glutes or quads, and you should do this type of squatting or exercise as a way to fix it. We're not going to go into that. All you need to know is that when you put the bar on your back, and especially low on your back, that's when you're emphasizing more of a posterior chain, okay? Now, there's a lot of other types of squats that you can do, especially using different types of bars. So you don't always have to use a straight bar when you're putting the bar on your back. If you come over here, this one here, it's called a safety bar, okay? So that whole thing is padded, but it comes out in front of you. Okay, so that's something else that you can use after you've learned how to do the barbell back squat itself. There's other bars that you can use as well. There's plenty of them out there. Now, the key to this whole thing is that you should be able to go through that squat movement strategy correctly from the beginning. You might not be able to reach depth, which means parallel. And for you, getting somebody to parallel is really only necessary, like truly, in that powerlifting type world or that Olympic lifting type world. Those are the only people that with significant load have to get down to there only because their sport specifically says they have to. Everybody else, you're kind of worrying about quality of life, and you have to think about a risk reward, right? Is it worth trying to get this person to push past the depth that they can do? Work on things slowly, pair it with mobility, and slowly let them get to where they need to, and then be able to increase their strength at those ranges of motion. Okay, so that is the squat movement pattern. Okay, make sure that you have written everything down as far as the cues, the anatomy, and the common mistakes, and then you can go ahead and move on to the next movement pattern.